All right, this is as good as the lighting is gonna get. So I do this thing, and I wonder if you do it too, where I kind of superimpose a story onto my life. And I position myself as like a character within that story. And these like stories or arcs often come with like some personality traits or character traits that I've kind of assigned myself in that process. When I was in school, I kind of thought of myself as smart, like I was going to take all the smart classes. But I eventually, of course, ran into a class, it was I think either pre-calculus or calculus, that like did not make sense to me. Like I was not going to get it. It did not come naturally to me. It seemed to come naturally to a lot of other people in the class. And I remember having this kind of switch flipped in me where I was like, okay, like my story is not going to be that I, went through all these classes and it was easy and I got good grades, and I'm intelligent and like I went to a good school, got a good job, whatever. My story is going to be that I worked really hard, at like, which is so, the fact that I'm revising that story at that point in my life, I think is telling in itself. But like that was the point of reframing where I was like, okay, I'm going to be a hard worker. I might not be smart, but I'm a hard worker. And that, changes my positioning of myself in that story. Now I'm an underdog. I really have to work for it. I'm also not saying that this particular reframing, I guess, was like a good thing for me. It, I think, improved my relationship with math a little bit, and I definitely didn't get it right away, but I knew that I could put in the work and eventually figure it out. On the other hand, thinking of myself as a hard worker and making that part of my identity, that I use as something to kind of overcome obstacles, obviously has its own repercussions. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that like I told myself a story about myself and about my place in the world, and I kind of created a narrative that that encircled it, or that I fit into. And I've been thinking about this having recently read Why Fish Don't Exist by Lulu Miller, and I thought this was a really good book. I don't know that enjoy is really the right word to use to describe it, but it did make me think a lot. I really recommend Jess Owen's video on this. I think she has a really great critique of especially the ending of this book, which kind of seems to suggest that one of the characters got their comeuppance who really did not. And an undercurrent that I picked up on from reading the book was its framing of David Starr Jordan from a narrative perspective. So David Starr Jordan, really awful person. He was the first president of Stanford University, big proponent of eugenics, and covered up some really awful things that his colleagues at Stanford did, because they were like his friends and he valued them, and also potentially at least covered up, if not committed, the murder of someone who was positioned to kind of stop his career, or at least really threaten his career. And what I appreciated about this book, kind of going in knowing nothing about David Starr Jordan, was how it kind of took me from seeing him as an underdog who persevered through all of these challenges, right? Because the author frames him as like going through all of these really difficult things in childhood, losing family members, and then progressing into adulthood, losing his wife, losing his children, at one point losing a ton of his research to an earthquake. All of these really difficult things that he faced, that the book, having me not knowing about him, the first good chunk of the book, I was kind of rooting for him. I was seeing him as this underdog character. With the way that the book was framed, I kind of wonder and suspect that that's also like the way that he saw himself. Someone who had been through a lot of hardship and was going to let, nothing get in the way of what he was going to do in life. And I especially think that he thought of himself as a good person. And so, if he had told himself the story that he's a good person in this narrative, and he's going to do great things for the world, then what is he willing to do? What is a person willing to do in service of that narrative? If they're not going to change themselves, and they've been repeatedly faced with all these hardships, and they're set in this idea of themselves as a good person and an underdog and someone who's really going to do everything that it takes to make X happen, or even just to avoid reconsidering the idea that you're a good person. Like, if he did cover up or commit murder in order to save his own career, was it, as like to me the story suggested, a way to continue serving his overall narrative or character arc? Like, did he think of this as, you know, he's gonna do great things for the world, he's an underdog, and like he's seeing overcoming this, you know, in the same way that he was seeing continuing to persevere after losing his research or losing family members, or you know, whatever? Is this just another barrier to him being able to do good or be a good person in the world? And look, like, I have no idea what was going on in David Starr Jordan's head. I like it just, to me, it highlighted the importance of being willing to kind of step out of these stories that we create for ourselves, and reevaluate our positions in the world, and how we interact with other people, both to avoid these kinds of like fixed ideas of who we are, but also to reframe, you know, our stories. Like, life does not make narrative sense, right? And you know, it's important to be able to step outside of whatever you've created for yourself. At least I do this for myself. The author Lulu Miller, like intentionally or not, I'm not really sure, drew a lot of parallels between David Starr Jordan and Donald Trump. Like Jordan, I think Trump is willing to do some really horrible things in service of his own self-image and like his role in his imagined story, sort of like how lies beget more lies, right? So yeah, it kind of made me think about like what are the stories that I tell myself? To what extent is it dangerous to think of yourself as good, for example? I don't know. Let me know what you think. It's something I've kind of been thinking about a little bit. How self-perception and telling yourself stories about yourself and your position of the world, especially when that involves like thinking of yourself as good or thinking of your work as vitally important for society at large, whatever, how that can be kind of dangerous and harmful. Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. Also, if you're watching this video, there's a really good chance that I've told you to go check out my friend Kenneth's channel, Ken Cloud. I am wearing the unofficial merch for that channel right now. He's recently started making really thoughtful and interesting videos, most recently about veganism and animal rights. If you haven't checked those videos out yet, you absolutely should. Yeah, thanks for watching. My song recommendation for this video has nothing to do with the topic of this video, but it is a really great song. It's called Erase Me by Lizzie McAlpine and Jacob Collier. It's just a really beautiful song. I've been listening to this album like on repeat. Very good album for September. And yeah, cool. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later. Bye.